Okay, so I thought this would make an interesting video as to how replacing one of these anti-roll bar links has turned into a slightly more substantial job. So the anti-roll bar links on my GTV were looking a little worn, and I was getting a bit of a knocking noise from the rear of the suspension. So I thought what might be good to do is replace them, but on a closer inspection I actually found that the bump stop on the spring at the bottom here was pretty badly warped. I don't know if you can see that, but basically it's coming away from where it's attached, so that's not going to help with the suspension bottoming out. Also, the spring is in a pretty poor state, it's pretty badly corroded, so it kind of makes sense to replace all of this. And while I'm doing that, it also makes sense to do the spring pans, which are these rusted out things here. So I mean, you might have got a bit more life out of these springs and spring pans, but not much, so it kind of makes sense to replace with new parts and do the whole lot. But the interesting thing about these is they have these dabs on there, and they also, the height of them is not quite standard. I think what's happened is a combination of lowering springs and damaged shocks has meant that the suspension's kept bottoming out, and therefore it's kind of damaged the bump stops. And I think rather than just do the springs and the spring pans, it makes sense to do the shocks at the same time, because otherwise it's just going to keep happening and it's going to damage the bump stops and everything's going to have to come off again. But I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing to show that, you know, simple, what might initially seem as like a simple fix can turn out to be a bit more complicated, and it kind of makes sense to consider what's happening, not just with replacing individual parts in isolation, but particularly if something's been modified, what's actually going to happen and the effect that it's going to have when other parts start to wear. So just thought that'd be an interesting quick video about what I've been doing on the GTV.